Hello, word nerds, and happy Sunday, and welcome to our live chat. So, today we are going to be talking about existing on the internet as a writer. So, just for our warm up question, I wanted to ask you guys, what is the social media that you waste the most time on when you should be writing?
It used to be Twitter, but it's becoming TikTok. I think everyone is slowly going to TikTok. It's so hard to not get the time sucked in. Like I used to be Instagram all the time, and now I'm like.
It's funny because I've been absolutely will spend hours on TikTok, but I only let myself do that if I'm filming a TikTok or if I'm on the treadmill. So if I'm working out, I'm allowed a full hour of TikTok because that makes me work out for an hour. And then during the day, I'm not allowed to touch it. So it has been working out okay for me. For me, it's not a social media thing, but I chat a lot with other writers on Facebook Messenger and Instagram Messenger and stuff. So that still is a time, not wasting, but it's a time suck. So that's my guilty pleasure. And if there's a notification on my phone that goes off, I'm helplessly drawn in. I can't not look at who's saying something to me.
Yeah, I definitely have to say TikTok too. I try to only watch TikToks on certain days. So I'll miss big trends and things that happen on TikTok because I will not pick it up for 3 days because it literally will consume my life. I don't know why my brain is just so give me TikTok, but I can't do it too often.
It's the format. It sucks you in because it's just it's for me as well. And I think it's something to do with the ADHD brain because it's the perfect, I think Rachel said this. It's the perfect amount of time to hook you in and it's interesting. And then it's next. It's constantly interesting. Yeah.
Every once in a while I'll be scrolling for a little bit and then be like, oh, that one that I saw 2 or 3 TikToks ago, I want to send that to a friend, and then I'll scroll back and I'll scroll back and I'll scroll back and I'll be scrolling. I'm how many have I done? Where was it?
And I feel the difference
realized that.
I was gonna say for me, Twitter is where I doom scroll. Twitter is unhealthy procrastinating. I keep scrolling and I'm why am I doing this? Where TikTok at least brings me joy. You know,
that's true. Yeah,
I'm wasting time, but it makes me happy, so it's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
I'm just thinking Twitter in general, and I know the book world is on Twitter. That's where all of the literary agents are who will ask about, oh, send me these manuscripts that have these things, or that's where Rev Pitted, that's where a lot of literary things happen. A lot of authors are on there, whatever. But yeah, it is more now become a doom scroll place where just all this bad stuff and drama's happening over there, and I'm I'm just on Twitter for a couple minutes every day, and then I'm if there's more than 2 or 3 bad or dramatic posts in a row, I'm I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly it. With TikTok, it's informative and or funny, or pictures of cats doing funny things, and I'm it makes me feel good when I'm get off of it. But Twitter was the same way. That's why I had to leave it, is because not even just necessarily author drama. It would also be this is the new thing that's happening with COVID. Here's this new disaster news. Oh, killer bees. There was just it's always the next disaster. And it's just almost a form of news that's just constant doom. It's inject the doom straight into my veins and never stop. It's it would get to be, I think, really negative for mental health in general. So
I think there's a lot of people on Twitter who like to look at the worst possible, the worst possibilities for any situation. Yeah, and talk about them as if they're a certainty, and then other people get freaked out by it. And a lot of the pandemic, I couldn't be on Twitter because there was a lot.
So bad for mental health. Yeah,
it's going to be going on until 2030.
I need to pace myself with the news. I turn on the actual news and then turn it off. Whereas Twitter would just 3-4 hours have passed and I'm I'm still scrolling. I literally had author friends DM me and be I I can't even remember at what point, but they were like, I'm so worried World War III is going to start any minute now, stuff like that. And I'm like, were you scrolling on Twitter? Yeah, for like the whole morning. Like, that's the thing. I mean, bad things are going to happen, but you getting worked up every time something bad does happen doesn't help your mental health, you know?
Yeah. Well, you can set like blocked words or like block people on Twitter. So I think that's also like take advantage of that block button if you need to.
Or you can set a time limit for yourself, which I think would be helpful for some people too. If you get sucked into Twitter and can't stop doom scrolling, I know there's a point where you can set an app on your phone that will give you like an hour and no more, and then it turns off the app that you're on. So that would be if you
that would be good for literally everything, especially YouTube, because suddenly it's 11:30 p.m. and I'm like, where am I? I've gone down this deep dive rabbit hole on YouTube, and now I'm like in conspiracy theorists, or like, oh, this interesting science, like my third scientific video on like poisonous frogs, and I'm like, how did I get here?
That one's not too bad. You're learning something,
right? Science, it's totally fine. It has nothing to do with what I'm writing or like what I'm studying or anything, but
you're learning something.
I'm learning something. Yeah. It's totally fine.
So do you think there's any like social media platform that's like necessary if you want to make it as a writer? Notice I use quotes because like make it is very subjective.
No, I agree. I do not think so.
I firmly believe you need a website. It can be bare bones. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have blog posts or anything, but you need to have somewhere where people can go, where they can see like what you've written, links to what's coming out, what tour events you're doing if you have those, a press kit for like libraries and bookstores if you're doing an event with them. They really need that. So like look up what a press kit is. So I like firmly believe you need that, but I don't think you need a single social media.
Ooh, I would beg to differ. This is also like I'm more of like the book blogging side of things. So like I see it like this. Whereas I think now, especially more than in the past, your book is part of your brand, and people want like you to be your brand. So you want to have those personal connections with readers. You want to be able to see things that they tag you in, or if they post photos on Instagram, you want them to be able to tag you in it. If on Twitter, you want someone to be able to tweet you like, hey, I really liked your book, and then you can retweet them or talk with them or whatever, like get connection with your audience. So I think in that regard, it would be nice for you to have one like personal, it doesn't have to be like personal social media, but like one social media where even if it's like Instagram, you post pictures of your writing space, or on Twitter, you tweet out like one line Wednesday, here's a line from my latest book as a teaser or what have you. So you have that one like personal space that people can like associate with like you being a person, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I
would say like you're not probably going to be able to be like who's the guy who wrote Catcher in the Rye? What's his name?
J.D. Salinger.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do like the Salinger thing and just like not be anywhere and not be available for fans to reach at all. I mean, you could technically just have a website and nothing else, and I think that you could still get published. And you could still do well if your books are really good and it happens to, hit the right note with people. But I think inevitably publishers are going to hope that you have, at least one form of social media. Does it matter if it's Twitter or if it's TikTok you're good at? No, I don't think that matters. I think any platform is going to be fine as long as you have that and a website. But I definitely don't think we need to be on more than even two. Like if you don't want to be, or if you're not going to be authentic on those websites. Like I'm on Twitter because I have, like Rachel said, I have a station on Twitter. I'm not there. I will check in sometimes. I'll tweet, an article or news, or I'll thank someone for tagging me in something. But aside from that, I'm not there. It's like news and updates.
Yeah,
but
I think updates accounts are a good idea.
Yeah, but it is there in case people want to tag me in something, like to essentially link it back to something. And I do think it does give you a kind of like presence on social media, even if you're not technically there. It's like, oh, this person is here. They do retweet things. They do thank people occasionally, that type of thing. So
Yeah. I do think I don't think you need to have a form of social media. I think the days are kind of gone of like this attitude of like you need to have a big following for publishers to pick you up for fiction. Like no, because they've learned that doesn't really make a difference to your book sales that much.
It does not.
So like yeah, I don't think you need to have anything other than a website, but it's a good idea to have one place where like fans can go to find out like what you're working on. Because like, yeah, they can go onto Goodreads or your website to see what books you have out, or even a book that's coming out like next month. But if they just want to know like, oh, are they working on like a sequel? Or are they like, you know, like what are they doing next? It can be useful to just have somewhere where you're like posting like, hey, these are the tour events I'm doing.
Yeah, and if you have a platform where readers can connect to your personality or your voice, whether that's through tweets or TikTok videos or longer vlogs, that definitely does increase, I believe, reader loyalty. And it certainly does for me. Like if I find an author I've literally found authors that I really like and then bought their stuff, you know, and I definitely am cemented as a more loyal fan to that person because I'm like, they're a really genuinely good person. They're funny, they're charming, they're smart. You know, I like their politics. They're just a genuinely good person, so I'm going to support them, right? That means buying all their books, even if I'm not necessarily excited about, you know, one book or another. But I really do think that it does help to have some form of voice out there so people can connect with you as a human being.
I also think it kind of goes down, I guess this is more like, again, like book blogging vision on, a lot of times people think that like, oh, to be able to have an Instagram account, you know, you need to have these beautiful flat lays of your book and these aesthetic pictures of you drinking coffee in front of your laptop. But like you really don't, or like, oh, you know, these like beautifully crafted Pinterest boards to tweet. And it's like, not really, like, as long as you are showing people that like, this is me, I'm a person, I'm working, this is a cool thing I'm working on. You know, here's a picture, here's a selfie of me in front of my laptop. Like, as long as there is that presence, I think you don't have to make it like this amazing, like beautiful aesthetic thing unless you really want to.
And I think similarly, there's like a feeling that like you have to be super on, like you have to be on there all the time, tweeting all the time. And like, if you aren't tweeting like every single day, then like you're going to lose engagement. And like, yeah, you might have less followers because of that. But if your goal is just to have somewhere where readers can find you, like you don't have to, like you can just tweet like every once in a while when you have an update to make, you know, like it doesn't have to be something that you are like really, it doesn't have to be like a second job for you if you don't want to.
Okay, so my next like talking point question I had. So if there was like an author, like a new author, a new writer out there that was only going to be on one social media platform, which one would you recommend?
If they're self-published, I'd say Facebook. Traditionally published, I'd say either Twitter or Instagram.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what it depends. It sort of depends what your audience is. Because if you're writing YA, or you're writing like maybe not middle grade. If you're writing YA, like TikTok is huge right now, so like it would be good for you to be on that. But then if you're trying to reach maybe an older audience, like Facebook would be a better place for that. If you're wanting, I mean, I think like Instagram and Twitter are kind of like the neutral zone. It doesn't really matter. Like you can probably just be on there anyways.
Well, I think if you're going with kind of just like a new writer who maybe like isn't published yet, I think Twitter can be, or Instagram can be a good spot to go to follow other writers and like follow agents and learn things about the industry. It's different when you're a published author and you're wanting to connect with readers versus like a new writer who's trying to connect with the industry. Those are two different things. So yeah, if you're like actually like publishing books, then like you want to like think about, like for YA, maybe TikTok, or if, you know, if you're writing like adult romance, you might want to be on Facebook and have like a Facebook group. I know a lot of romance authors do that.
I mean, if I were starting out again, I think what I would do is kind of just get on all of them and see which one feels natural to me and which one I like the best. Because, you know, I it's like newsletters. Everyone for ages and still is like, you have to have a newsletter. And I'm like, it's like pulling teeth for me. You know, I would sit down and I would try to write a newsletter and I would hate every second of it. I would put it off. So it would be like 3 or 4 months between each newsletter. Like, should I have a newsletter? Probably. Am I going to do a good job of having a newsletter? No, I'm not. So I'm not doing it at all.
I am signed up for a newsletter, and I maybe get it once every couple of months because I forget that I've subscribed. It's Holly Black. But I always forget. And so I'm like, every single time it pops up in my inbox, I'm like, oh, Holly Black's emailing me? And I'm like, oh, no, okay. Oh man, too bad. Too bad.
I don't read newsleuters. I don't.
Yeah, me neither. I like open it and I like skim and I'm like, whatever, and then delete it. So like you can put all this effort into something that like some people might not even care about.
Well, like I feel like a lot of newsletters are just like updates of like, hey, this book is coming out or these things are happening, and I already see that on other social media. The only author newsletter I care about is Susan Denard's because she's like giving like author advice. Like she gets like really deep into stuff, and so like I think that's really great. But that's what she likes doing. Like obviously not everybody is going to want to do that. But other ones are just kind of like publishing updates, and I'm like, I already saw that on Goodreads. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You have a book coming out.
Yeah. Also, Word Nerd Kelly is in the audience today. Hello. And she says that if your goal is for letting new people find out about you and your book and building an audience, 1,000% would recommend TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram for if you hold on, I'm reading this wrong. Twitter or Instagram for that. Oh, so that you have somewhere readers can find you. There we go. I made it. It took a minute, but we got there.
So TikTok for like discovering you, Twitter and Instagram for like people who already know who you are finding you. I think is what she's saying. Yeah.
I also
crazy. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. It's fine.
I was going to read someone else's comment. So
yeah, do it.
Okay. Is it Crazy Foxy said it seems like Twitter is the industry standard for agents, editors, and writers. And yeah, I would agree with that. That's where a lot of people are. If you're wanting to make those sorts of connections, just keep in mind that you can't like pitch agents on there or anything. So like, please don't pitch agents on Twitter. But if you're just wanting to like kind of follow some people and see like where the winds are going with publishing and things like that.
Yeah, and there's hashtags like MSWL and stuff where you can see what they're looking for, and Pub Tip where you can learn, tips for publishing. So yeah, some of that's good for new writers for sure.
I know there's a lot of like Twitter giveaways or Twitter contests. Like I know there's like RevPit is our Word Nerd Kyra runs. There's like pitch wars and stuff that happen on Twitter. Plus, I know a ton of authors do giveaways and such on there as well. Yeah. I also kind of want to bring up YouTube because, hello, we're all here. And I've noticed that like some authors are like really on YouTube because it kind of does, especially with like NaNoWriMo, because we're also in Camp Nano right now in April. Video hosting is, I guess, a really good way to do certain kinds of writer material. Like I feel like live streams where you do writing sprints like we do on Sundays sometimes for our live chats. You do word sprints, you do live write-ins, you do like Q&As, or you can do like writing vlogs. I know is a huge one. Reading and writing vlogs are really big right now. So it's like such an easy way to be able to connect with people because people can just type in like writing blog and then there's oh, hey, maybe there's you. And you're like, yeah, I'm writing my novel. And here's a video diary of me on my publishing journey, like trying to get published. And a lot of people can connect with that. And then again, once or if your book does come out, that's that audience that's like kind of seen you build it. So that's like somewhere that you could get like, or there's, I know like Alexa Dunn is on here. And a lot of other people do like, I don't know, like Q&As or types of writing advice videos. I can't think of literally anybody off the top of my head right now, but there are people out there and I do watch them.
Yeah, I do think that YouTube is the one that like you have to like really want to do it. Like Twitter or Instagram, you can just get on, you can post something every once in a while. But like if you're going to do YouTube, you have to be comfortable filming yourself. You have to put a lot of time into it because you have to like plan, you have to film, you have to edit. So it is much more of an investment than even TikTok.
That's a lot more of an investment than TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the first things when I switched over to TikTok. I realized like this is incredibly fast compared to YouTube. Like with YouTube, it's such a like you film yourself on a camera and then upload it to your computer and then into Adobe and then you edit it. And then I'm like doing TikTok the first time and I'm like, you film it and edit it in the same place. Like, what is this? And then it's 60 seconds. I'm like, I can film 2 or 3 back to back, whereas YouTube is just, it takes, half a day for one. If I want good quality content, so
and you're exhausted afterwards.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like the long form content is definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Investing in it is a good way to talk about it.
Yeah. You have to really
well, like
love
also
it.
like trends on TikTok happen, like Des said, like over like 3 days and they're done. Whereas trends on YouTube, I still see the same like trendy topic for like months. Or, you know, and I'm no stranger to doing that too, being like, oh, I saw this trend like 6 months ago, but I want to do it now, so I'm going to do it now. Whereas I feel like on TikTok, if I saw something that happened like 3 weeks ago, I'm like, oh, this is so overdone. Like, move on. Like,
It's definitely a faster moving platform for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I know we talked about YouTube a little bit, but I was going to ask, what platform do you think is like the most useful for like learning new things of like, and when learning new things in like the writing industry and like learning how to be like an author and things like that?
Probably Twitter.
Probably YouTube or Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it's like industry. Every time I hear industry, I'm like Twitter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm also kind of old school, and I like reading people's blogs. Like I like reading writing blogs, especially if it's an author that like I like their work. If they have some information about like how they plot or how they like figured out, you know, their world building or something, that can be really helpful. Mm-hmm. If you don't, you know, want to make videos, then
do people still do blogs?
I still do a blog.
Popular, but.
Yeah, they're definitely less popular, but I like blog tours are a big thing for.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. I should start reading more blogs.
Penumbra Mind said something in the comments about Patreon, and that is something that I do not have experience with. But no, okay, great. If anybody who's watching this right now or watching this in the future, please leave down below.
That's not. Do we count that as a social media platform though, or is that?
I think we can.
It still is.
Like it is behind a paywall, but yeah, it is still interactive. And like people, I mean, this as far as I know, because I also do not subscribe to anybody on Patreon. But as far as I know, it's like some like a Penumbra Mind. Yeah, Penumbra Mind mentioned, and it's like, this author gives chapters from an unpublished book series, or they give like behind the scenes of writing a book, or like here's a sneak peek at the cover, or something that like only patrons get to see. So in that way, I guess that's more of like community.
Yeah, I'd be curious if that's more common with self-published authors.
Maybe,
likely.
Probably. Yeah, I had a Patreon when I was doing my podcast, and I also do subscribe to people on Patreon, mostly like Sims creators and not really writers. But there is like different levels of like things that are offered for however much you want to like give a month, and some are as low as like $1, and some can like some Patreons go up to like thousands of dollars if you want to give them that much money.
Wow. That's insane. No, like I personally follow on YouTube, I follow Hannah Lee Kidder, who's a writer, and I like her stuff. She's very dry sense of humor, and yeah, her Patreon stuff is like. She like extra short stories that she didn't put in her books, or like writing critiques, or like small little like workshop days. I think like that's a good idea because or like one of the videos that she just did was about self-publishing covers and like which cover service was the best for people who are wanting to do it themselves. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like in that way you can learn a lot from people doing long form YouTube videos.
Kelly said she's actually seen it more often with traditional publishing than self-publishing, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's always interesting to me when a like big name, large scale YouTuber gets a Patreon, and I'm like, why? Like you're I know you're raking in that AdSense. Like, why do you need a Patreon? Like, it's strange.
And in Griswold had a good question. What do you think is the best way to start if you're intimidated by creating an online presence? With a basic author website or with slowly dipping your toe into Twitter or Instagram? I think if you aren't published or going to be published soon, then like you don't really need to make a website unless you really want to just get started and like claim that domain. Like I said, if you are publishing, then like I think a website is where you should start.
Yeah, definitely. I know for me that I had like a really like cheap WordPress website free, where I just did like the occasional blog post and stuff before I, actually had a book published. And then I think a year out from when my first book was coming out is when I'm like, okay, I'm going to actually pay money to get like a professional looking website. And then after that, I think I was already on Twitter, maybe a little bit, but yeah.
I think there was a time, like back kind of when we were starting this channel, so like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, where like there was very much this like, even if you are nowhere near publishing, you don't have an agent or anything, like you should have a website already and you should be blogging. Like it was kind of around the same time as that attitude is like, you should get lots of Twitter followers. And yeah, it is. And I always thought that was kind of like weird. It's like, why would you need a website if you don't have any books coming out anytime soon? Like, unless you really want to blog because you enjoy blogging, like you don't, or if you have a common name, so you want to like grab that domain name. But you don't really need a website if you aren't.
That's the thing with like creating content before you're published. Like I personally think unless you have content you're really excited to create, like if you like making funny TikTok videos about book characters or something, or you want to tell short stories through tweets or something, like if that's something you really enjoy, then 100% go for it. But like I wouldn't worry about creating a vast amount of content and getting tons of followers, because like you should technically be concentrating on, you know, making the book be as good as possible. Like that's the main thing. And then you worry more about being a professional social media person once your book is like about to come out, because that's when things start to ramp up. That's when you start doing interviews and blogging more, et cetera, but yeah, not at first. Like it's not the main thing that matters.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that, like if you're, I mean, being traditionally published, or even just like kind of like in that sphere of the idea of like, yeah, let's make this video go viral. Like we need a viral video. Let's do that. You know, and it's like, or like, oh, you need all these Twitter followers because, you know, that will make you look professional, or the like, oh, you have to have a newsletter. Like everybody has a newsletter. And I'm like, it's kind of like this old fashioned way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
That like it doesn't
say on a newsletter.
Yeah, well, it's like that old fashioned way of thinking about it that is like someone who doesn't understand the internet. But it's like that kind of still permeates a lot of things.
Yeah.
That is not really the case anymore.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is because I still see this like advice bandied about like you need a newsletter. It's like I actually don't know anyone who reads newsletters, or maybe more than one newsletter. Like most of the authors that like I'm subscribed to a lot of newsletters, and they're either in my spam box or I just don't get any, or authors don't send them out. Like the authors I talk to are like, yeah, I technically have one, but I remember to send it out once every 6 to 9 months. You know, like we're all bad at it. So I'm not sure how important it is, you know, like.
It probably was big at the beginning.
I think
like
so.
At the beginning of the internet, you know, at the beginning of like of social media, but not anymore.
Well, people used to say you have to have a blog too, I feel like, right? Like, so things change fast, it seems like, but
it used to be like, even outside of writing, just like everybody had a blog where they just, like when I was in college, it was like everybody had a blog where you were just like talking about random stuff.
Or a lifestyle blog, or like a clothing blog, or
exactly.
We had a question in the comment. Misty Kate asked her thoughts on Tumblr.
What is Tumblr?
I think I remember the last problems on Twitter, like people coming from Tumblr over to Twitter.
I can't even remember the last time I was on Tumblr.
I never had a Tumblr.
Technically have an account, but
I had many Tumblrs. I had more than one Tumblr for a while, and then I got super burnt out on it. Like junior to like, or I would say like sophomore to senior year in high school, I would like stay up way too late on Tumblr. Like I had like one for like cartoon shows I liked. Like I had a lot of different ones. So like I completely forget that Tumblr exists now because I just used it so much. And now like I never use it, so it just doesn't exist to me.
I had a really intense like period where I was on it a lot. I never really posted much. I never actually really understood how to post on Twitter that well. Like I would like reblog things sometimes, but outside of reblogging, I was like, I still don't know how this works.
It's one of those platforms that I never caught on. Like I'm like, this just doesn't come naturally for me.
There was a period of time for me where I was following a lot of people who blogged about Once Upon a Time. When I was like really into that show, and so I would just like get on all the time and just like scroll through and like see people like posting like gift sets of like Emma and Hook, and that was all I cared about. And then once I stopped caring about that show because it went down the drain, I stopped getting on Tumblr. So.
So what do you like? So if someone has started on social media under like one name and like one brand, and then they decide that that brand is no longer for them, how do you suggest they go about like changing something like their name, or if they're going by a pen name now and they weren't before? What do you think? Like, how would you navigate that?
I think it could be useful. Like, well, I know like on Twitter you can do like a pinned tweet at the top. So that can be useful, just like kind of put something at the top for like maybe 6 months or something, just being like, hey, like this is the name you might recognize, like this is this person. If you're wondering who this random name on your feed is, or like I'm kind of switching over to this focus. I'm not sure what you do on other ones. But
I navigated away from the if you guys remember when there was like the Facebook author pages, and then suddenly they switched it so that you had to pay an enormous amount of money to get more than like 2% of your followers to see every post. So yeah, they that was the Facebook fan pages. They tweaked that so that I think I had 6,000 or 7,000 followers on the Facebook fan page, and then I was suddenly posting and 10 people would see it. Right. So that
dumb.
was very frustrating. So when I switched over to, I can't remember what I did, a group or something, I switched over, which is now abandoned as well. But I switched over to that and just put a link and was like, okay, like I can't do this anymore. I'm going to migrate everything over to this platform. So follow me here. I think I had to post that a bunch of times though, because of course nobody saw it. So
Yeah. I think it also depends like what you're switching over. So like, okay, let's say you're writing both middle grade and YA, and your middle graders are like fluffy fantasy stuff, and then your YA is like horror. Having like 2 separate accounts might be best instead of trying to like put them together. But if you're writing like YA fantasy and YA contemporary, like that's okay. You can put that together. Just like post equally about one or both, or like whatever. That should be fine. If you wanted to like change your name, just do like a quick Instagram story, being like new account name, and then like that should be fine.
So what do you suggest for people who are like maybe not good at social media? Like, how do you toe that line of like what should you post and what should you probably like keep off of social media?
Well, if you've got a professional author account, I think you should keep your children off social media, but that's just my opinion. I often get like, if it's official author accounts, then yeah, I don't necessarily want to hear that your baby had 2 dirty diapers, back to back or whatever. Like I've literally seen that on people's Twitter and been like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna unfollow you because I was eating and I thought this was an author account. Like, yeah, or like thoughts about, my editor said this or my agent said this, or like you definitely have to be careful not to overshare what goes on behind the scenes. Like you can definitely share some of it, but remain professional and know that your agent or author will or editor will probably see it. And you have to think about what they'll how that will affect them. So
yeah, I say like encouragement to other authors or like updates pertaining to like what people have signed up to you for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think in general, kind of like being careful of like complaining or venting about things. I mean, there are definitely situations where it's appropriate, where like it needs to be talked about or something like that. But yeah, being careful of like, oh, I'm gonna like sit here and like complain about this other author because like they like wouldn't share their gum with me at a conference or something. I don't know, like something silly, or like I'm annoyed at this feedback my editor gave me because I think my book is perfect. Like being careful of like, and just in general of just, I don't know, there have been some authors I've come across that just like come across a little bit too, when you're like, okay, like 90% of what I see you post is you complaining about like just general things, like life things. And that can be kind of, especially when you don't know someone personally, it's like, what do I really want to just like hear you complain about stuff all the time?
Account dedicated to you whining. Yeah, for sure. Also, like I'm not going to name any names, but like I remember a rather big author complaining about not enough people showing up to her event, and it was like, A, that's incredibly disrespectful to the people who came a long way to see you, and B, to the bookstore that worked so hard to put together this event for you, and you're whining that there's not, only 40 people showed up. Like that might be a small amount to you, but like I think I had like 5 people at my signing and was like so grateful that anybody at all came. And so to hear you whining about only 40 people is like, that's hard to take, so it's just not a good look to anyone,
Yeah, especially I'll say lately, without naming names, there's been a lot of authors behaving badly online, and I think it comes down to like people just like doing dumb high school stuff, like doing this like behind the back gossiping about other authors, or like being rude, but publicly, right? Or like, I'm not naming names, but like this person who sat next to me at this conference during this panel was like so rude, and like
here's a link to the video.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Specifics of the situation.
Yeah, these are their initials. Like, it's just, I don't know. People are just like being petty and like rude and like trying to bring other people down, and I'm like, this is not like, what are you doing? Like this is, it's not a good look to like be the mean girl.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, if anyone's coming in late, we're not talking about anyone calling anyone out, like as far as racist actions or words go. Like a call out is a totally separate thing, but we're talking about like gossipy mean girl behavior publicly, because that does happen fairly often. Or I know we were talking about pre-chat, like authors that attack or publicly bash reviewers, authors that complain about 3 or 4 star reviews, authors that complain about not getting on the list they wanted to get on. I know like ages and ages ago, being just floored hearing about an author that was blaming her followers, like her readers, that they didn't get her on the New York Times list, like literally saying like, you guys failed me, essentially. And I was just completely floored, because I'm like, how ungrateful are you that you have this amazing fan base, but they didn't buy enough to get you on the list, so you're complaining. So yeah, just
so
stuff
entitled.
like that. Keep it in your diary, like maybe you're disappointed. You're allowed to be disappointed, but don't be disappointed publicly and rudely online,
Yeah. Well, it's like all people that read your book, like not everyone's going to like it. You just have to accept that. And, if they want to leave you a 1-star review on Goodreads, they can, and it's up to them. And like, they just don't like it. Like it's, and like, you don't have to go and attack or like specifically like, like engage in this argument online over like, you didn't like my book and like apologize to me and stuff. Cause it's like, it's not going to be for everybody. And like, you just have to kind of like accept that and like not get into fights with people.
Yeah. I finally reached a point where I always knew as an author that Goodreads is not for me. It's not a platform for me. It's a platform for readers. But I think it took me a long time to internalize that, i.e. not go on there to see like, how's my book doing? How many stars does it have? What does this latest review say? Because you're insanely curious, of course, right? But I've finally reached a point where I know that nothing good is going to come of this type of thing. And also it's not for me. So I don't spend any time on Goodreads anymore. I don't even check, recent reviews. I don't know if I'll, be strong anymore if another book comes out. We'll see. But yeah, at this point, like I'm not on Goodreads, and a lot of authors are, and a lot of authors, I don't think there's been anything lately, but authors used to get caught like replying to reviews or like, opening sock puppet accounts to argue with reviewers, or I don't.
Yes. Or we're like making burner accounts on Twitter to argue with people over how they didn't like their book. And that's insane. I'm like, you need to like put down your phone.
Stop.
Yeah. We have a couple questions that are related to like things that you post. So good timing. Penumbra Mine said, I know an author who followed the social media tease formula to get hype up for her book, but she started a year before her release. And by the time it came out, everyone was over it and no one bought it. How long do you think one should social media share a book? I think that can be a problem sometimes.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, because I know it's not just me. I know this is like people have done studies on the effect of pushing something too much so that the person engaging with that or seeing that actually has the feeling that they've already bought it. because they've seen it so many times that it's become so familiar. I know that's happened to me where I'm in a bookstore because I buy so many books and I see a cover and I'm like, do I own that? And I can't remember if I know the cover so well because it's on my shelf or because I've seen it over and over. And I never end up buying it because I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I know I've had that happen with books that like I've been like interested in the book and maybe I've like followed the author on Twitter and the book comes out in like a year or something and I'm like, oh, this sounds really good. I'm excited for when it comes out. And then they just like post and like retweet so many things that I'm over it by the time it comes out. I know there have been a couple books where like they've done a little too much like retweeting people who have already read the arc. Like I don't know, like sometimes there's a little bit of a like, oh, like I don't know, I can't even describe it, but like too much like insider, like I'm an insider who's read this book and here's all these inside jokes from it and the book isn't even out yet and like and none of that time it comes out I'm just like so
and you can't relate to any of that if they're like, oh, so and so hot, or like, oh, this is such a funny part, and you're like, I haven't read it, I don't care about any of this is not relatable. If you see that over and over again, it becomes annoying. It's funny because I followed an author on Instagram and I actually had to unfollow her because she posted her book cover so many times that I'm like, I want to punch the person in the face that's on the book cover, because I'm like, it was a cartoon person, it was a real person, but I'm like, I've just seen it so many times. Every time I would open Instagram, there's the book. And it would just be like, if I saw it in the bookstore, I'd be like, I have now a negative reaction to it. Because I'm so sick of the sight of it, because it was literally every second post or something, I think. And she posted every day. Yeah. There's a thing that says it should be every 5 posts. And I actually think that's even a little much. If you're posting every day, or more than once a day, I don't think I need to see that every 5 days. If I'm following you and I like your content and I like the things you have to say, I don't need to be bombarded with your book every 5 posts.
And I think a year before your book comes out is not a bad time to start posting about it, but you just have to be careful about not posting about it too frequently, I think. And
posting the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and the types of things you post. Like I have no problem with you being like, here's a review from this journal or here's a review from this person, but it's when it starts getting into like this really specific stuff about your book and I have no idea what you're talking about because the book is not out yet.
I think you can also do like promo in a way that doesn't feel like promo. Like there's a big difference between an author saying, buy my book, it's $2.99, or it's coming out this date and here's the cover, versus an author saying, hey, when I was writing this book, all I ate was bagels for a week. And I was obsessed with this. And here's me at my desk with like bagel shrapnel and 6 cups of coffee. And I'm like, that's hilarious. That's interesting. That's behind the scenes. And I still know what book you were writing when all of this was occurring. So I get that, kind of lodged in my brain. I'm like, oh, this is while she was writing such and such book. So regular posts like that show me behind the scenes, which I find fascinating. I know a lot of readers find fascinating, but you're watching it unfold and you're seeing the process of writing a book, which is fascinating. So that by the time it comes out, you're like, hey, this is the book that I've been following along. I think Rachel said something about following along with them writing the book. And also I know the name of the book. Right. So,
and like relatable things too. Like I always like when a book isn't like is coming out soon and there's like, I don't know, like a gif from like Parks and Rec and the author's like, oh my gosh, like this is totally one of the characters in this book. And I'm like, oh, like I think that's really funny. And I think it'd be funny to read a character like that, something where I can connect it to something that I do know.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you definitely have to be careful about writing. Like even if it's really cool art, maybe, but like I've seen authors posting like they drew this character Ash from what I'm just totally random name. I'm not, saying anyone's character, this character from this book. And I'm just like, it's okay, I guess. Like I'll scroll past it. I don't care. Like, cause I don't have
really specific scenes from the book. And I'm like,
I'm like, haven't read the book. Don't know who this is. Don't care about them, So I think you have to be careful, but like, is this interesting to somebody that hasn't read the book? I think is the question we need to ask ourselves before we tweet or whatever.
And just like space, because it's like you can post some of that stuff that is more interesting to someone who's already read it, but you just need to make sure you're kind of
space it out. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, another question about what you're posting is Crazy Foxy asked, what do you think about authors posting their political beliefs?
It's a good question. For me, I think that I don't know if I call it political beliefs. I would say that your values as a person are going to be pretty linked to what you write a lot of the time. Like, I know that I, as a queer person, I'm going to be tweeting about that occasionally, just 'cause, like, part of my life. And, you know, if somebody goes into my book and reads it without knowing that I'm a witchy queer author and this book is a witchy queer book, they're going to be pretty offended, I guess. I don't know. So, like, if you don't like what I'm saying online about how queer people deserve rights or whatever, you're not going to like my book anyways, is what I figure. So,
yeah, in like any direction, I want authors to post about it so that I know. Like,
yeah, true.
You know,
Yeah, if
you're a person whose values do not align
yeah,
with mine.
if you're a raging homophobe, I want to know about it so I don't have to put myself through the agony of reading a crappy book.
Yeah, some people are like, you shouldn't post like racist stuff. I'm like, no, go for it. I want to know you're a racist.
Call yourself out. I want to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like politics and religion are those things that I'm like, small doses, I think are better.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah.
Like, if that becomes all your like Twitter feed or whatever is about, like, totally respect that. Do that if you're like super passionate about like politics and elections and that's like what you're posting about all the time, like, go for it. But like, I may not keep following you if it's just like so much that I'm like, I agree with you, but this is not what I'm on here for. It's not what I'm on for, you know?
Actually, and Griswold said something that I think I said this. I don't know if I said this in a video or a live stream or whatever. But the idea, like, don't make yourself the victim by claiming you've been canceled because consequences are not the same as being canceled. Absolutely. You can say whatever you want on the internet, but you have to know that there will be consequences in a good or a bad way for what you say.
Yeah, that's what, when people are like, oh, my free speech, or like, what is it they always say? Oh, I'm being censored or whatever. It's like, no, you're not. Like, people are just reacting to what you're saying. No one's busting your door down and taping your mouth shut with duct tape. Like, nobody's censoring you.
Yeah, and like, being held accountable is not the same as being canceled.
Yeah. No, it's true. But yeah, I do agree with Emma. I think that one of the reasons I am off Twitter is because there's a lot of activists on Twitter, which I think is good and it's valuable. But, you know, when 50% of my feed is activists, it's like, I'm like, oh, there's 8 new things for me to be angry about today. And I'm like, I can only take so many things at once. That was one of the things that I think I was like, I need to take a step back from this. Because, like, I definitely believe in being an activist for a cause you're really passionate about. But I don't know if Twitter was the right platform for me to engage with that content. Because it's just, you can't have a long interest, you know, can't have a long, thoughtful conversation as well as I would like to on Twitter. You're very limited. So
much nuance is lost.
Yeah.
Because people read like the first tweet in your thread and don't read the rest of it. And they're like, but what about this? And you're like, I literally addressed that in the third tweet.
Well, and that's the other thing. I'm like, I don't want to be silent. I want to fight some of these people, but I could literally spend all day fighting bigots and racists, and then I would not have a job. You know, like,
well, like, also, this is also the biggest thing that, like, again, on all social media, if you post something or apply to something, that means people can see it. So, like, I find this so interesting, especially on TikTok. Well, recently, because that's the platform that I like most on right now. But, like, people will say the most random stuff, and I'm like, you know that people can find this, right? Like, or like, I guess Twitter and TikTok, I think, are like the big platforms that I see this on, where people, authors or like readers or what have you, will say terrible things. And I'm like, you know that if a publisher who wants to work with you Googles your name, they can find this, right? Like, it's on the internet. Like, you know, like,
when people like things and you're like, you know, we can see what you like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, yes. That happened to me with somebody that I followed back and then was like, saw his likes, and I was like, oh, okay. Now you're looking at not safe for work things during your Twitter.
I was scrolling through on my lunch break at work, you know.
Oh Lord. Yeah, Crazy Foxy said you can end up alienating some people. MAGA people read books too. That is absolutely true, but the same thing holds true for me. It's like, I don't think MAGA people are going to get along with my content. So there's like really literally no point in censoring myself so that they're more comfortable, because my books are going to make them deeply uncomfortable anyways. So they're not my target audience. So it really doesn't matter.
It's a little bit like, what do you want to fight for, right? Like, where do you want to put your time and energy? Do you want to put it into like negative stuff, or like people like trying to change the mind of someone who leaves you a bad review, or are you going to put it into like making a good book or like supporting somebody else, you know?
Yeah, supporting other authors. Yeah. Like I think there are ways that we can be activists that aren't trying to fight trolls on Twitter, because I think there are other ways that are much more effective, you know.
And half the time when you start fighting trolls, you end up just boosting them. Like it's just giving them more views, more engagement, which is what they want, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And you it's almost never an argument in good faith on their side. There's really it's like beating your head against a brick wall for a lot of them. There's no getting through.
Yeah. There are more other questions. You heard that right.
More other questions.
There are other questions. That was mentioned. M. Griswold said they read a book blog about social media scheduling apps, and do we use any? And if so, which ones?
I used to use Hootsuite.
That one is being recommended in the comments.
Yeah,
as well.
I kind of fell off the wagon with that. When I was posting daily on Twitter, I used that and actually did find that it got fairly good engagement, because it would post about 3 times a day with a few hours in between each tweet. And it actually, I did find it was helpful because I didn't have to be constantly on there. You still do have to be on there regularly enough in order to interact with people that are replying, though. And then I did find I got a bit burnt out from having to constantly come up with 3 tweets a day. Even if you don't have to tweet them at 8 noon and after dinner, you still have to come up with the content. So yeah, I did stop using it eventually.
Yeah, my scheduling only goes for like YouTube scheduling, or like some of like, oh, I tomorrow at 10 a.m. I will release that post, and like that's it.
Yeah, I think it can be useful if you're like a published author, you're really busy, and you have content to be putting out that frequently. Then like I could see the value in it. Because if you really want to get that engagement, like Erin said, you will get more engagement if you're posting regularly, and that can be a good way to do it. But you have to have the time for it still.
My ideal is, if I ever got really big, is to like what V.E. Schwab has, literally just has a publicist tweeting for her. I'm like, that sounds great. I could do that.
One of the other questions was from a number of mine is, do you feel BookBub and Goodreads are too much the same? I don't. Yeah, I don't know BookBub. Actually, I just started talking to somebody from the Likewise app, which I have not used.
I keep seeing ads for that on TikTok.
Yeah. I've heard some like pretty good reviews from people, so I'm interested in checking that out.
I know BookBub. I mostly only know BookBub in a way of like, hey, you can get your book up on BookBub and it will increase sales. Like I know they send out like, buy this book to people, but I don't know, like I don't think of it in the same way as Goodreads. Like Goodreads, I will just go on and read my reviews when I shouldn't be. But I don't know other than just like my publisher will pay to have advertisements sent out type of thing, or have a sale on BookBub, I think is what it is. So I think I would think that maybe self-published authors would maybe be more engaged and on there as a platform. I'm not totally sure.
I only heard of BookBub in terms of like self-publishing when I was listening to like self-publishing podcasts. Like I heard them talk about BookBub, but like that's the only context I've ever like heard it discussed in.
Yeah, I think it's one of those tools that self-publishers are going to use probably a lot more than traditionally published authors, because like I know that I don't touch any of that stuff. I don't really know even how it works. Like if I'm having a deal with, say, Witches of Ash and Ruin, it's my publisher that goes to them and sets that up. So I really don't know what goes on that side. If they have, maybe they have a social media platform as well that you can participate on as an author. I don't actually even know that.
Yeah.
So
Kelly, why aren't you here?
Yes, we need our resident self-publisher. Like
I know Kelly's having some internet trouble today, so she's not able to join us on video, and I don't think she's in the comments anymore. But maybe we'll talk to her. We'll get her to weigh in on some of this stuff. Maybe we'll tweet about it. I don't know.
I tried to self-publish ages ago, and it was absolutely not for me. I was not capable of doing because I feel like as a self-published author, you have to engage in social media a lot more even than traditionally published authors. Like I know that there's a lot of self-published authors on TikTok who are doing really well. Like I think
I bought some stuff from people who I saw on TikTok who were like holding up their book cover or like doing like a green screen of their like, this is my Kindle like $2.99 book, and I'm like, cool, I'm gonna go check that out.
Yeah, apparently it's actually had like, because I always say like people saying that there's not a lot of book sales that come from YouTube or Twitter or whatever, but TikTok actually seems to be making a noticeable difference for the self-published authors I've heard talking about it. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, like I feel like if I am going to buy a physical book by a brick and mortar publisher, I'm not really going to know about that author before they do. Like I'm going to find out about the book from, I don't know, Epic Reads or Goodreads recommendations or like a preview event that I go to. And then I look at it and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. And then I'll like Google the author, or then I'll check, oh, are they on Instagram? And like, I'll look them up, but I won't necessarily just like follow somebody because it has writer in their bio. But if it's something on like TikTok, and I see this author being like, I just self-published this book and it's $1 on Kindle. I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll go check that out. Yeah, why not? So like, I feel like that's the two, like one of them is you have to like wait until people come to you. Whereas the other one is like self-publishing. Like you have to like pull people in yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I often wonder about because like right now I have TikTok and, kind of like locked into the ADHD and neurodivergent niche on TikTok because they have a really cool platform with amazing people on there. Like a big component of TikTok seems to be like mental health and neurodiversity, which is really cool. But Kelly and I were talking about this before, and she's like, well, you should also create like a separate one for author. And I'm like, okay, I'm totally going to do that. But I'm like trying to figure out, like, that seems to be a growing segment as well of TikTok. I would say more book talk is bigger, but like as Rachel is
yeah, book talk's big.
Yeah, but yeah, I've seen some really big authors on TikTok, like I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 followers. So
yeah,
it's nothing to see that.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that there's more like traditionally published big name authors on TikTok now, but it is a little bit slower. Like I follow actually V.E. Schwab just today made a TikTok account, and like the book talk is like flipping their minds. Like everyone's freaking out.
I'm gonna have to follow her on my
yeah. But yeah, like Jennifer Armentrout, like book talk loves her. I saw Victoria Aviar just made one, and I follow hers are pretty funny. Yeah,
and it's so funny because I look at the really big ones though, and I'm like, it's not necessarily a reflection of, because like I'm finding with my ADHD account. The organic engagement is huge. There are people finding me. Whereas on Book Talk, I look at giant authors and be like, okay, are they being found, or are their audience from other platforms coming over? Right.
I think it's like an automatic thing. Like I saw Hafsa Faisal was on there. Like she came up on my recommended feed, and I was like, oh, I know you absolutely follow.
Oh,
like
immediately.
Like, interesting. Not even a thought. Like I liked your book, so I'm going to follow you, kind of thing.
So it's being suggested to you because somehow the algorithm knows that you like that person, which is creepy and also helpful.
Well, if you put hashtag book talk on anything, I will like almost guaranteed like heart it. So like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another.
I wonder what like the big, like what the new thing is going to be, you know, like what the new one for authors is going to be.
And I keep wondering how long TikTok will last too, because like we had a Vine thing, and I think one of the only reasons that got shut down was something to do with Google, wasn't it?
I think it wasn't.
Twitter owned it.
It wasn't making money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
They said they couldn't compete with YouTube, so that's why they shut it down.
Oh,
interesting.
I thought it was they couldn't make AdSense off of it, or they couldn't like market it properly. Or wasn't there something like they promised a bunch of Viners like $1 million each to do this thing, and then they couldn't pay up, and then I remember that was like a scandal a couple of years ago.
Probably when they shut it down, they didn't pay the Viners they promised to pay.
I don't know.
It's interesting though, because I do think, like, looking at that, I do wonder if one of the reasons TikTok is so big is the pandemic. Obviously, everyone was trapped in their houses and going a little crazy and making kind of crazy, funny short videos, and also it really did slide into that like space that had been left by Vine. So part of me does wonder if this like little snippets of content is like a place that's going to, like, TikTok will stay. You know what I mean? It won't be like Vine. It won't be like Tumblr. Like, really, it was just filling a need that people had for shorter content, because we had YouTube and then we had nothing, right? So
yeah, I wonder too, like, because it definitely did go from 0 to 100 in like 2 months.
Oh yeah.
So I'm wondering now that, like, once people, I mean, we're still in the middle of a panorama, of a Zamboni, of a pepperoni, a pancetta. We're in the middle of, you know, this still for a while, I think. And I know people, back in the fall, no, it's not going to happen. Like, it's going to be a little while more, at least. So it's still going to be popular, and like, it still is very popular. In 5 years, I don't know if it'll be the same, which is sad because it's my biggest platform, and I'm like, damn it.
You know, like, how long before like young people are like, oh, TikTok is just a bunch of older people? You know, like, that's always
right.
Like, you have the new generation of teenagers come in, and they're like, oh, that's the old people social media. You know,
right.
Like Facebook was cool when I was in high school.
So we got what, 10 years? Maybe.
I mean, TikTok has been around for a while now. Like. At least like 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years?
No, because it was Musical.ly.
It's Musical.ly. Yeah, it started as Musical.ly.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
It's been around since Vine. Like, it was around when Vine was still a thing.
The funny thing is,
Musical.ly being annoying. Like, it was just like annoying people I know would like post their Musical.ly videos on like Instagram or something.
I felt like TikTok was annoying at first, and then I was able to get the algorithm to show me what I actually wanted to see. Right, like, but it does make me wonder if it will continue to be a long-lasting thing. Like, Instagram and Twitter have been around for a really long time. They're longer-lasting things.
But I also see people posting Instagram reels or like reposting TikToks onto Instagram.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's just a thing that could just be like up and gone. Like.
Yeah, that's very interesting to think about. Like, that's another thing to think about as an author online. If I invest a whole bunch of time into one platform and it goes kaput, you know, like, that's something to consider too. A little unstable, a little shaky ground. But I also feel like if you enjoy something, then why not, right? It's not like you're investing hours and hours that you hate into something and it's going to be, you know, a regret, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions, and we are on our hour mark. So I think this is a good time to go ahead and call it. Thank you so much to everyone for being here tonight. Next Sunday is movie, right? Movie night.
Yeah.
So next Sunday is movie night. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I did it. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
You did it.
And we will see you throughout the week in our videos. Bye.
Bye.